apologize for not having my previous Prezi PowerPoint anymore. I maxed out the space they give to you, so I have to go back to this one. So it happens. Now, one of the interesting things that's going to happen and is going to be the subject of today's lecture is that as soon as World War I is over, we're like, hey, World War I's over. We fixed it. Now, going back home, don't make us come over there again. Right? What's that? What is the mentality that I told you that we kind of pray, but really shouldn't, because it's not really true to us, honest with ourselves. The whole concept of us being over there alone is known as isolationism. Because we're going to be over there, we're going to be alone. Leave Europe stuff over in Europe. Leave United States stuff, United States. Now, is that true? No. But we're going to have a big isolationist movement after World War I. Like, you guys messed it up. Coming over there, fixed it, and really didn't fix it because what then was created is just going to set the stage for World War II. Okay? So what I want you to do is somewhere on your notes, kind of like, you know, you have your hey, Japan messed up thing, whatever. The reasons Japan's going to bomb us that we started a couple of weeks ago. I want you to start reasons that the Great Depression started. Okay? So we're going to start there. First thing, as soon as the war is over, we start demobilizing. And when we demobilize, what that means is we're going to go back to peace. All this stuff that we built for the military, all these men we had drafted, we're going to just say goodbye. We don't need you anymore. We're going to go 3 million soldiers to 130,000 in 6 months. Go from 3 million to 130,000 in 6 months. That's just 30,000 more than what Germany allowed Heat to police their forces. That's it. Now, this causes a lot of turmoil because what has happened when all these men went to war? What occurred? Women went to work. The women went to work. So what happened, and I know you're probably thinking of Rosie the Riveter, time period. It's not this time period. That's World War II. The same thing happened. However, as these men come back, the women are kind of just whooped out and they go back. During this time period, there is no way or there's nothing provided for these military men to readjust their lives. It's not happening. Programs or assistance. So what's going to happen is into this void of some veterans is going to create the American. Have you guys ever been to an American Legion? There's an American Legion Hall that we have dances. And that's when. Now the American Legion is going to promote the interests of World War II veterans and try to lobby Congress to get assistance for them. What is going to happen is Congress is going to create what is first known as Veterans Bureau that is going to provide assistance. This is later going to change to what we know today as the Veterans Administration. Now, what the American Legion was pushing for what was known as the soldier's bonus. Now, the soldier's bonus would be the difference in pay that a soldier lost from going as a full-time worker to a soldier. Okay? Now, can you imagine the headache that would cause? So, wait, is this a good idea? Yeah, it could be a good idea. And here's because they're forced out of their job. They had to leave, and now they have to go live off of lesser pay. It could be a good idea, but let's say I make $100,000. Let's say Spencer makes $50,000, and we both end up getting paid $25,000. Well, there's a $75,000 reduction for me, $25,000 reduction for him. What should the soldier's bonus be? If he gets $25,000, But I get $75,000. Is that fair? Is it fair that should I only get $25,000 because that's what he's getting? So what happens eventually with the soldier bonus, it gets paid to the soldier in the form of 6 months paid insurance. They are going to get some form of bonus, but it's 6 months paid insurance. So you don't have to pay your own insurance for 6 months. So it's a way to make up money that you've lost. Now, one of the major problems with us going over seas is that we are going to take with them anything that perhaps we had with us, and bring back anything perhaps that was there. Now, as a result, we are going to experience worst pandemic of H1N1 flu that the world has ever seen. This is worse than all of those lost in World War I and World War II. It strikes young, the healthy, not the old and the infirm, the very young, or the infirm. Just recently, last October, our doctor called us and said, "You need to come get your kid vaccinated." We haven't done it yet. This strain of flu that was out probably right now, was killing 13 and 14-year-olds. And it was just, it was targeting, attacking the healthiest and strongest there was. And it's the same type of thing. It started somewhere in Kansas. First reported count of comes from Leavenworth, Kansas, soldier, but it spread all the way across the earth. It is called the Spanish flu epidemic because first reported in the newspapers in Spain. Spain was neutral, and as a result did not have the wartime censorship that the rest of European nations did. Before it burned itself out, 50 to 100 million people lost their lives. This is the population of the earth. Died. They covered every continent, well, except Antarctica. But it was reported in the Arctic, North Pole as well. Now, one of the events that was caused by the Russian Revolution and their embracing of communism is First Red Scare. First Red Scare is going to come into being after the assassination of Russian Tsar and his family and the embrace of communism. And then if you will remember, in Germany, German Navy, and that led to a overthrow of the monarchy there, the creation of the Weimar Republic. Very weak, going to be able by a group that we'll talk about probably next week. It's called the First Red because communists adopted the color red as a symbol of their struggle. Me, understanding communism is simple because I grew up in the middle of the Cold War. It may seem kind of absurd that you got all upset about this whole concept of, communism. Have this huge Cold War here with this stupid policy of capitalism versus communism. We are a capitalistic system. If we were to come in here, and if I was to come in here and say, okay, I have the average for the last test. The average is a 69. Okay? 69 average. However, there were 5 people that made 8. In order to be fair, I'm going to give everybody a 69 average. I give 69 on this exam. What would happen? Those 5 people would be mad, and those people who made 30s would be what? They'd be ecstatic. Woo-hoo! What would happen the next time I gave the exam if you knew that was going to occur? Everybody would make bad grades because they knew that they were going to get the average. However, what would occur? You would not work as hard. Grade was not going to grade set. The same thing with communism. In communism, nobody owns anything. In communism, the government controls the economy. They control the citizens. And what happens is the government works to create a utopia. And once that utopia is created, the government is no longer. However, it's absurd to think about humans. Think, well, if I don't have to work, but yet I'm going to be paid X amount, what am I going to do? The same analogy I just gave. I'm not going to work hard if I'm going to be paid this amount. What if somebody does want to work? Start laughing. You're not going to get paid. Capitalistic system. If I work harder, I get paid more. Yes? Okay? It's completely different than what we have. Remember when we talked about Marx? Developed the communistic system and said, must work to the violent overthrow of your government to establish. There are people working in the United States, versus who are trying to get communists to grow and overthrow the capitalistic system. Now, was it ever a real threat? No. However, thanks to people like A. Mitchell Paul, who was Woodrow Wilson's Attorney General, the first Red Scare would be stoked up to a flame. People were very scared about it. And the reason they were scared is because they thought they were going to lose their livelihood. Palmer stoked up these flames because he was trying to position himself as Woodrow Wilson's successor in the 1920 election. He would be unsuccessful because the Red Scare would slowly burn itself out and die off before it got. However, thanks to first Red Scare, we have a major limit placed on your first right. Right? You have freedom of speech, right? Okay. You have the freedom of speech. I always, my dad was a government professor, so I always knew my rights. So, my dad, such and such. And so I'd go into class, and I was the worst type of kid in class. Okay? So I went into a class, and the teacher's like, shh, quiet. You can't tell me what to do. I've got the freedom of speech. Okay? Then I was right? Why? Because you have the government protects your freedom of speech, right? Yes. Okay? If I say, Spencer, I think you're ugly, and the reason you wear a hat all the time is because you got a bald spot. Okay? And he's like, that's my feeling. And he's going to sue me. I'm like, you can't sue me. That's my freedom of speech. No. There's no government relation. No government relation. Okay? So what happens is you have the freedom of speech. Government can't stop the exercise. How many of you guys paid attention to the news of California over the weekend? Spring break, ready? I know that's kind of a broad topic. But there was I always love the fact that liberals are the most intolerant of politics. Okay? Because Because what happened is this woman who's at University of Santa Barbara in California walked up on this demonstration on campus in which these kids were in the free speech zone of campus handing out flyers about abortion. And in this they had some pictures of aborted fetuses. Now that's very gross. But this professor ripped the sign out of her hand, this girl's hand, 16, and then pushed her in the altercation. Because she said, you're not supposed to be here, you need to leave. Okay? And she's now being sued, the professor, okay? Because she said she was a professor of women's studies and pornography. They have a PhD in that? Women's studies I can understand, but pornography? What is your dissertation? Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm not going to go any further in that because, no. Anyhow, so what happens here is, where was she? The girl who was pushed was on the campus in a free speech zone. Okay? The thing is, colleges can restrict your freedom of speech. We provide a video. That's how you get around it, okay? So like out here, around the flag, we have a freedom of speech area. We had that demonstration. Don't think with those people about 5 years ago for the abortion right, the rights of children, the pro-life group. Now, people were upset. Oh, that's gross. Well, they're in the free speech area. You have the freedom of speech. See, here's the thing. There's a lawsuit that gets to the Supreme Court in 1923 entitled Gitlow versus Court. And in this case, a man was distributing anti-war material to people. He said, do not go to war. This war is immoral. It is unjust. You should run to Canada. Okay? And he is arrested. He sues New York, saying that New York violated my First Amendment rights of speech. Okay? It gets to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says, well, here's the deal. Yes, if you were standing on the street and handing out these flyers, that would be freedom of speech and that would be okay. However, you were not doing that. You were outside draft court where men who had been drafted coming in get drafted to get measured and shipped off, and handing them these leaflets that this war is immoral and unjust. You should run to Canada. And as a result, that could have a negative consequence on the United States winning the war, and could have long-term ramifications. So what happened, because of the location in which it occurred, it is ruled that you have the freedom of speech until such speech reaches clear and present danger to the United States or other people. Okay? So Gitlow versus New York actually puts it clear and present danger. It's going to be further refined, but it's the first step in. Now, also, how many of you guys, when you were little, you go to a theater, your parents probably the first thing they told you to drive the theater. Anybody have that? I've heard. The reason being is because from this lawsuit, the Supreme Court Chief Justice said what he was doing is akin to yelling fire in a crowded theater. How many exits are there in the theater? There are 2. And if you've got 1,000 people in that theater and you yell fire, fire. What's going to happen? People are going to run out and they're going to get trampled. There's going to be mayhem and some people lose their lives. So you have the freedom of speech until such speech is present danger. How many guys, anybody go to South by Southwest? There's a guy who got arrested at South by Southwest. It's called Tyler Bader. Okay? He wanted to go to this speech, and this whole group of people went with him, and they were maxed out. They said, we can't let you in. And there was police there. Well, he started a riot and forced his way in. As a result, he was arrested, okay, for that. Because he was being, his actions represent the clear presentation. He in the room, fire, police officer there, and as a result, and started fighting. Now, as I said, the Red Scare is going to kind of burn itself out, but at the same time, we're going to see the rise of movie theaters. We'll talk about that. One of the movie theaters as a medium conveying a story or start being on the rise. Most famous example is called Birth of the Nation, made by D.W. Griffith. And in this, you can look it up on YouTube. I can only watch about 5 minutes without laughing. It's silent. And basically what it does, it talks about Reconstruction of the South. And it portrays the African American as being abusive to the white Southern. And it portrays Yankees being, but no, seriously, the white Southerners are getting pushed around by the African Americans. I don't think so. But and the funny thing is, they didn't have any African Americans as African Americans. They did. They just took a black car or something over white people's faces, and it's called blackface. Talking back to the, but every now and then somebody does. Basically, what it did is it glorified the South. It glorified the KKK. So it actually saw the rebirth of the Ku Klux spurt. If you remember, the KKK came about as a structure, so you see a rebirth thing. A major issue, especially South. I knew guys in high school claimed to have heart. Hey, I'm KKK. I will tell you, one time I was out driving to a place I probably shouldn't have been driving. You guys know where Lake Somerville is? I was out by Lake Somerville, and I was driving at night. I came around the corner. I have a road that shouldn't have been on. There's a cross. I shook the heck out of there. Like, whoa! Yeah, I was like, fire, cross, no, I'm kidding. So, thanks to the industrialization that was, what? Kind of freaky. So, thanks to all the industrialization that helped us provide more material for what we want, we're going to have a lot of innovation and changes to how technology affects us in our everyday lives. First thing we'll talk about is the Model T. Model T is called the Tin Little. When it first came out, it was $800, thanks to the assembly line and getting anytime that a new product comes out, it is going to cost the most when it first comes out, right? I'm trying not to buy Xbox One. It's very difficult to buy. My boys are like, I want to buy. But I know in 3 years, instead of $500, it'll be $200. And that game that's $60 still be as good. It'll be. So, why does it get cheaper? Because the more they're produced, the cheaper they get. Well, same thing. $800 is about $22,000 at that base price. Is going to come down to $250. Around $7,000. So people are going to be able to buy cars a lot more. And as a result, society is going to change. How so, you say? Well, what do you need for a car? Gas? What else do you need for a car? Gas and oil. What else? What? How about roads? Roads. You need roads to go on. Why do you need roads to go on? Well, how many guys have ever watched like an old Bugs Bunny cartoon or something really, really old? See somebody driving along floppy, tires and little black, big tires, there's patch. Like a white patch, black tires, white. That's true. before vulcanized rubber is applied to the tires, they're just like inner tubes. Go over some, pow! Put a patch on. Off you go, pump it up, off you go again. Pow! Patch on. Especially during wartime, because rubber is going to be rash. Then you're not going to be able to hit. So roads are going to be. In addition, let's say your job's in town. You might, but all that there are apartments. You don't want apartments. Because you have a car now, you can drive out of town and live in a suburb. You're going to see the birth of the suburb. Movie theaters, as I said, are going to reach small towns, and this is going to have an interesting effect. Nobody really actually plans. Probably thought is that people emulate what they see on television today. Television. Yes, yeah. Is that true? Yes. Okay. You don't even think about it. It's ingrained in us. It's just how we are. My daughter, free. Every time she watches Frozen, she's got the scene where Elsa's going up the snow, the mountain, build her castle. She's got the movement down. She knows every single movement. She takes her blanket around her neck, and when Elsa comes off her cape, she goes like that. Never go. No. That's what she does. That's what we all do. Okay, we emulate what we see on television. Back in the 30s. Television. Back in the 30s, you had classic Humphrey Bogart, where the fedora, that's what they did. They all did that. So what happens also is they see people. Okay. That guy's got. And it drives this debate. And you're going to see the birth of the worst organization, the entire word, called advertising. I have one of our 57 chefs. And I bought cars, like 7 Chevys, 6 Chevys. So with the deception, I realize how one advertising. So theaters finally make it to small town. My small town, my hometown. Where's your job at? Okay, nowhere. You know where the independent coffee shop is? Yeah. Okay. Simon Theater. I was talking about created very during the 20s. Simon Theater. Yeah. Close. 8. Last I saw. So, it took 2 years for it. That's why I killed it off. And so what happened is I used to go to this game. One screen. Beautiful. Asbestos hanging from the ceiling. Scared the heck out of me. But I always wanted to sit in the balcony. The balcony up there. I always thought it'd be cool to sit in the balcony. Why? No.
Wait, so like
it's in the 20s. Yeah. Why? I'm glad you guys don't think of this automatically. Segregation. African Americans were only allowed to sit in the balcony. White, separate, but at the time I got there. Now, something else that is going to change the way our society relates to one another are radios. Radios are going to become almost universal during the 1920s. Imagine, I know you guys are going to have a hard time thinking about this. Imagine no internet, okay, no texting, no cell phones, entertainment in your house was a book, probably the Bible, the only one you could afford to have, and that only lasted until what? Sun went down. Then what? What? Get up early. What? No light. You don't have electricity. You have candles. Okay? You got to make mild. Caution. Now you can have this new high-fangled thing that brings you the news of the day. This happened today. Here's the news about it. Right? No longer do you have to wait a day or two to find out what happened by getting a paper out. Hear it up, Rick? One of the major things that is going to change after World War I is we have a new group of people that are trained to fly airplanes. But we have nothing to do with it. Okay? Hey, you guys are pilots. Back to the sawmill. War comes again, we're going to need you. You need to keep your skills sharp. How are we going to do that? Well, keep you flying. As a result, in 1925, Congress passed the Kelly Act, which says mail will be delivered by plane. Aha! Now you have a job for all those pilots. And then a year later, somebody says, oh, wait a minute. These guys are flying over there. What's important for them to have? Flying everywhere, what do you need to have? What? We got it. Airport. Got to have landing strip. So the Air Commerce Act of 1926 is going to create and provide airports. Now, airplanes are going to be made all the rage, although very few people are actually going to go on. There's really no reason to. They're very small. Really going to change matters in 1957. Charles Lindbergh becomes the first person to fly across the ocean, Atlantic Ocean, from New York to France by himself. Like this. Very famous. Then in 1932, Amelia Earhart attempts to become the first female to fly around the globe. She takes off, heads west, never seen. Sound kind of familiar with what's going on? 777 flight west. No. I think you're talking about Helms had a helmet. Yeah. Well, the thing I don't understand about she started. I want to say like California. The thing about that whole issue is in the time period the plane took off from New York and when it hit the Trade Center, on the phone, not a single phone call. But what would be the point of hijacking it? Well, right now anything is just
Yeah.
everything is just. I heard that this morning. I heard planes flying below 500 ground. That's 777. That's like shit. That's past. There's areas that crash. It was in that area. They said
Wait, find it.
no, I'm saying because the report. So, but back to this. Telephones are going to see a dramatic increase to be readily available to most people. It's not like you guys today. I was thinking about this just recently. My daughter has a phone, doesn't even use it. She texts. Everybody she talks to, she texts. You guys use your phone to actually talk? Guys? I'm talking about the guys. Guys, actually, other than your parents. You know, no. Okay. No. Hey, what you doing? No, that's better. I had to wait till my parents got off the phone. The doctor's kid had his own line. They were rich. I had a guy in the last class said, "Hey, we had a party line. It was a line that just went out to your location. You shared it with maybe 2 or 3 people. And you pick up the phone, you listen, and somebody was talking, put it down, and wait until they were finished with the conversation. Just one line. Pick it up, dial the number. Talk. What? Yes? Yeah. Yeah. My girl one time called me up and said, no. Girl had date. You really like her, right? And I was like, oh. But telephones are going to become more common. Electricity in the cities are going to be very common. Out in rural areas, not really until FDR gets into the Great Depression. Period. Availability of electricity, and that's going to be spurred by the increase in items that require it. Dishwasher, vacuum cleaner. Oh my goodness, an electric sweeper. Just run it and sucks up all everything. It's great. An electric mixer. Fantastic. Well, this brings us to what a candidate running for president, Warren G. Harding, would call, we are returning to normal. We are going back to the normal pattern of the United States. The return to normalcy. Warren Harding is going to, he was a, I think he was a senator. He's going to run for office. Republicans are going to nominate him, and he's going to get a problem. Nomination. And he runs against James Cox of Ohio. Now, as you see here, blue is Republican, red is Democrat. What happened? It's a landslide. South is still solid Democrat, but going to be in 19. But Harding is going to win election. Now, during his administration, he is going to oversee the implementation of a new amendment on Volstead, the 18th. 18th going to be added to the Constitution. And the 18th Amendment states that prohibition shall be the law of the United States. What does that mean? It means no alcohol will be allowed in the United States. How absurd of a law is that? Pretty absurd. Why? Drugs are illegal. You guys know how to get drugs if you wanted to, probably? Why? Because as long as there is demand, we'll find a way to do it. Yes? So what happens is the 18th Amendment is added to the Constitution, which says prohibition shall be laid. However, it's up to Congress to actually stipulate a law that says this is how it's going to be. So, Congress passes the Volstead Act, going to enforce prohibition. And what it does is it forbids the manufacture of alcohol, it forbids the transportation of alcohol, and it forbids the selling of alcohol. Forbids making, shipping, selling. Can't make it, can't ship it, can't sell it. Did I leave something out? How about consumption? It doesn't say anything about drink. You can be arrested by Treasury agents. Those are the individuals who still destroyed. If you were shipping it, you could have your vehicle, you could be arrested, your vehicle impounded, and the alcohol destroyed. Or if you were selling it, you could have your place visit. However, if somebody came upon you with a beer, they couldn't arrest you for that. Because it wasn't illegal to what? Drink it. Okay. Now, why do we do this? Well, big time to provide for the morals of society. And there's a big movement of women who are behind it to be very kind of crass and blunt, tired of their husbands coming home and beating. So the best way to do that is to make alcohol illegal. As a result, just because it's illegal, does that mean people are going to stop doing it? No. Okay? You're going to have people start making their own whiskey and gin that we call moonshine. It makes it nasty. I remember when I was in college, our biology teacher taught us how to make whiskey. He said the first thing to do is, when you distill it, is the first batch that comes out, don't drink it, you'll go blind. Know that. It was rather nasty. As a result, they would cut the alcohol they had made, and they would put things in it. Mixed drink. Rum, wine, beer, coffee, that replaced by mixed drinks and gin, because then it's trying to make. Now, people who created and shipped this alcohol were known as bootleggers. They come from the term people come because people have flat. They would also offer in the boot on their bed. So bootleggers. There were illegal places to get alcohol that were known by a variety of things. Blind tigers, blind pigs, what have you. The best one that sticks the most is Speed. Is mainly because once there you knew that they were in the there with get alcohol, they were busted to talk about whatever you want. Now with this, as with any form of illegal traffic, there was organized crime that would come along with it. You would see the influence of mafia, organized crime families. We'll talk more about that when we get especially to the 30s. It's really big. But you would see a lot of racketeering going on. What racketeering is people who come into your place of business and say, hey, you need protection. What do I need protection for? Well, you never know. Somebody can come in here and knock over your place, damage it, destroy it. Well, that's never happened. Been here. Yeah, well, somebody might. I can provide that. I'll provide that service protection. No, I don't think that. It's never happened. Next day you come in, it's happened. Oh, good raw place to stay. You walked in. Oh, my God. What is it? He or his goons are the ones who did it. And it's a protection racket. That's the charge. Now, in addition, in 1918, but in 1920, I got that wrong. Yeah, I'll get it. In 1919, 18th Amendment, 1920, the 19th Amendment, in the 19th Amendment, 50 years has passed since Susan K. Elizabeth Cady Stanton have been told society is not ready for women to vote. They're ready for all men to be able to pass the 50th Amendment that is the Constitution. Now, 19th Amendment is going to provide votes in federal elections to women. Now, women have had the right to vote in statewide elections in many states for a long time. However, voting in federal elections is now it's universal across the United States. Women are going to be given the right. Now, this is kind of confusing, but I want to walk you through it because this is part of the reason we're heading towards the Great Depression.
Put that.
No, for the review, when you get a little bit further, I've got 3 that we'll talk about. But this is kind of those 3 are big pictures, kind of like the path. Okay. So this is what's happening. World War I comes. We give the Allies $5 billion of their money. 1917 money. Okay? Not 2014 money. Here is $5 billion to buy things. Where are they going to buy things? United States. Here's money to buy stuff from us. You need to fight the war. Okay? We're going to do that. Here's your stuff. What does that do to our demand? Demand for our supply. What does it do? Straight up. What does our supply do? Demand goes straight up. We try to find that sweet spot with supply and need. And when it does, hey, it's going great. We're making money. We're making serious change. And then what happens is World War I comes to an end. What should we do if we were thinking ahead? So we had evidence that this is going to occur. It happened in 1907 when the Japanese-Russian War, Russo-Japanese War comes to an end, and they were buying both sides were buying their stuff from us. We're still producing. War ends. They say, we don't need your stuff anymore. And we're like, what happened? Economic depression. What happens after World War I? We should just scale back our supply. We should come back, where we were before, but we don't. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to artificially inflate our government, our economy, to continue to produce at the levels that we were producing at during World War I. But, we'll get there in a second. In 1921, Congress is going to pass the Budget and Accounting Act. Budget and Accounting. Create the director of the budget. Here's the deal. Since the dawn of the American Republic, we have always had a budget. This budget is made by Congress. Nobody was enforcing it. How many guys live on a budget? Anybody live on a budget? How much money you make? You got to live on the budget. What happens if you do not live on the budget? You either go hungry or in debt, right? There's only one entity in the United States that's allowed to go further and further and further and further and guess what, further in debt without any ramifications. Let me guess. Let me tell you. It's not you. It's the government. That's why we're $19 trillion in debt. If you blow a budget, somebody's going to come after you, right? Hey, why didn't you pay this bill? Hey, why didn't you pay this bill? Hey, why didn't you pay this bill? You spent more than you brought in. Congress is going to say, we're going to take care of this now. We're going to create a department that creates, that sets up budget, and then make sure we stay by it. Make sure that the revenues that we're bringing in is what we're supposed to be bringing in. Create a comptroller of public accounts. They're going to say, this is the amount of money we should be bringing in. This is the amount of money we're spending. If we're spending more than we're bringing in, something matter. Now, because that supply and demand spot somewhere, World War I, demand was kind of like that, right there, supply, demand, supply. Because now, after the war, demand is like right here. Supply is still way up there. What do you see coming in the long run? People aren't buying goods. People don't buy goods. What happens? prices go way down, and if people aren't buying your goods at all, what is going to happen to you working the farms, which is create working factories, which is what you need? What's going to happen? You go out of business. So what happened is instead of saying, hey, you need to stop making all of these wartime widgets, the United States government goes to the Allies and says, hey, we're going to give you money. We're going to give you money, thanks to the Fournier-McCumber tariff, that says, buy our goods. Continue to buy our widgets. So basically what we're doing is we're artificially inflating our supply, our demand, so that we not have to realize that people don't need our widgets anymore. Here's some money. Take it, please. Why? We are artificially inflating our economic system. That is dangerous. So what happened here is that during World War I, the Allies were buying American goods, right? War comes to an end, which results in increasing production. Yes? Okay. Or the demand, or the supply. Yes? Basic economics. Come down here, war is over. You don't need those tanks anymore. You don't need tanks. Therefore, you're not buying stuff. So what are we going to do? Here's money so that you can continue to buy things from. Maybe you're not going to buy wartime widgets, you're not going to buy tanks, but maybe you want to buy a truck. Give them money. We're going to say, here is money, low interest loan, to the Allies to continue to buy our goods. We are artificially keeping our system solvent. Now, at the same time, because of all the turmoil that has been going on in Europe, we're going to see a huge mass of invasion of immigrants who are going to be coming to America. That Neil Diamond. They're coming to America today. Showing my age. That's okay. So what happens here is you've got all these nations. You've got all these nations that have been around forever. Okay? And what they are doing is they're in war-torn areas. I know I've talked about World War I since 1914. 1914 to 1980. Battleground. People who are not affiliated with war are having their homes, their lives, their families destroyed. Just because World War I erupted in 1914 doesn't mean that there hasn't been problems there beforehand. There had been 3 Balkan wars before this. Back in the 1890s, we had problems in the same area. So what happened is people see the United States as a place of refuge. Now, I know all of you growing up studied the Statue of Liberty, and you read the poem on the Statue of Liberty that said, give me your tired or your huddled mass yearning, freedom, blah, blah, blah. What you don't understand at the time period is it only meant Western European white. Okay? Western European white. All that it meant. That's all that it applied to. 1790, we set as requirements to become a citizen. You had to be a Western European. Become a citizen of the United States. That's why when the 13th Amendment is added to the Constitution, 1865, it says African Americans are in that all still there. But there's this belief that what makes America great, remember that whole concept of nativism, belief that America is great because is that they are coming from places like England, Sweden, from Germany, from France. These are considered desirable Western Europeans. Eastern European people are considered dirty, they're considered uncultured, and they're considered basically undesirable.
There is a certain connection. I've been able to it's a black market shopping. They're all made for slow. What I think is certain is a dramatic shop. footage I've seen.
That is a classic episode of Seinfeld in which they do away with, the city does away with high pressure shower heads and they put in low flow. Nobody gets the shampoo. So as a result, they go to the black market to get Yugoslavian shower heads out of the black market. And Newman says, basically says, what? Look, footage I've seen, Serbians are, look, they're beautiful people. They're like, no, not from what I've seen. Where are we talking about? Yugoslavia created Serbia, Croatia, Macedonia, Montenegro, Eastern European, considered what? Dirty, not desirable. Okay? So in 1921, there's this fear that all these people are coming in and they're changing the United States. Okay? And we don't want them to change the United States because we don't want to be like them. So we are going to pass the Emergency Quota Act. And what this does is it says that we are only going to allow 3% of the numbers of that nationality in the United States, thanks to the 1910 census. The 1910 census. We're only, according to the 1910 census, whatever the nationality was in the United States on that census, will allow 3% in. So let's say there's 100 Serbians in the United States. Every year we will allow in 3. That's it. Only allow 3 in. 3%. But if you look at this chart right here, 1910, it's a pretty big year. So it doesn't really put a dent into the immigrants that are coming in. And so we are going to modify that with the Johnson Immigration Act in 1924. It's also known as the National Emergency Act. So what happens here is that we're going to push back the date to 1890. 1890 dip here, right? 1890 is a dip, and we're going to lower the number to 2%. Now, a part of this that is going to cause another aspect of the Johnson Immigration Act is the Asian Exclusion Act. Asian Exclusion Act, guess what? What does it do? Something called Asian Exclusion Act. It is the act that excludes Asian. Okay? Asian Exclusion Act, the act that excludes Asian. Basically saying we will not allow anyone of Asian descent into the United States. Now, who does this cause get upset? Okay? What group is really upset about it? Japanese. Chinese, they really don't care. Japanese are very upset because Japanese are very nationalistic, very ethnocentric, and they believe themselves to be the master race. Before Hitler comes into power, they believe that everybody came from Japan. Therefore, they're better than everybody else. Therefore, when the United States abrogates the gentleman's agreement that TR made in 1907 saying that we'll treat you guys nice, don't come over. They get that. Well, remember, it wasn't. Okay, they're saying you don't want any. But you're also Asians are more than Japanese, Chinese, Asians, all of them are seen as not being what we want as being the United States. Okay? And then the National Origins Plan is the final portion. And basically what this does is it caps how many people are allowed to come in each year. That is 1.549 million allowed to immigrate. Once that limit is done, now look, you can see here when we look at the pie chart, concern. Red is Northwestern Europe, blue is South. You can see 1881 to 1890, all red. By 1891 to 1900, there's greater growth in Southeastern Europe. In 1901 to 1910, 3/4 of all immigration coming from where? There. That's why they changed 1910, because most there, they're saying 10. 1911 to 1920, and then by 2030, shift back. West. They're not. They're not. It's just culture. Well, they're considered the poor white trash of okay. You know, driving through Paris, you know, your culture. You're driving through London, your culture. Driving through Germany, your culture. Driving to Serbia. By live yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Harding's administration. We really haven't talked much about that. We need to talk much about that very. What year was he elected? So therefore, going to die. Well, if anything we can say about his administration, he died before we figure out how much he really knew about a lot of the scandals that were rock. There's a lot of scandals with rock. Talk about. And that is the biggest. That's the Teapot Dome. In the Teapot Dome scandal, Harding's Secretary of the Interior, a cabinet-level position named Albert Fall, is going to arrange with the Secretary of the Navy to transfer land from the Department of Navy Interior Department. Okay? Well, who cares? Well, it just depends. The land in question is Elk Hills, California, and there's Teapot Dome in Wyoming. These areas were areas that we had found oil, and were pretty convinced there were huge oil deposits. As a result, they were set aside for naval reserve. That means is nobody was allowed to use it, because when war came, and if it did, we need lots of oil. And this was set aside for the United States to go in, drop a pump jack on, pull the oil out, put it into our ship. That's what it was designed to do. All right? That was its goal. What happens is once Paul gets a hold of it, he leases it out. He leases it out to Pan American Petroleum Company for Elk Hills Reserve, and he leases out Teapot Dome Mammoth Oil Company. Later it is discovered that he did not go through the normal procedures of accepting bid to get the agreement, let alone the fact that he's using naval reserves to private companies. Because he went with a no-bid contract, meant, hey, here you go. You get it, you're done. Nobody else can compete. It's later discovered that he had received $300,000 from Mammoth Oil Company to agree to this deal. And from Pan American Petroleum, got $100,000. Eventually, this would be discovered. He would be indicted and convicted, be sentenced to 1 year in prison, and charged $100,000. What happened to the other $300,000? You got to keep it as $300,000. The Supreme Court would eventually take away the contract, get back to the United States Navy. Now, what did Harding know about it? It involved two cabinet-level positions talking to one another and making a deal that one guy got rich off. We don't know. Harding was a terrible judge of person's character, and when this was slowly starting to break, he would make a comment to someone, "My God, this is a hell of a job." I have no trouble with my enemy. I can take care of my enemies all right. My friends, my blankety-blank friends, they're the ones who keep me walking the floors off. Well, before this could burst out into the public, in July of 1923, he goes to Alaska where he eats some crab. He experiences some pain in his chest, pain to be food. It turns out it was a heart attack. He would die a little less than a month later on August 2nd. He would be replaced by his vice president, Calvin Coolidge. Calvin Coolidge was known as Silent Cal because he didn't like a very flamboyant version pop. And he would not, he was basically as different party as you possibly imagine. He was also, he was known for being quiet, Silent Cal. The humorist Will Rogers was once bet $100 that he could make Calvin Coolidge smile. Took the bet, and then later in the day, when the president shaking hands, and as he shook Will Rogers' hand, Will Rogers said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name." Now, if President Obama walked in here, would he need to introduce himself? "Hey guys, I'm President Obama." They need to do that too. Would you know who he is? Same thing with the president. Going to meet the president. There's the president. See the picture before you know it's the president. Not going to do that. So when Will Rogers says, "Sorry, I didn't catch your name," he won. In 24, the economy is going great. The economy is going so great that Republicans nominate don't change a horseman in the street. So they nominate him to win. Democrats are going to nominate John Lewis, and Coolidge wins his election. You know, funny story, I don't know. His son dies in the White House. His son was playing, you know how your parents tell you don't wear shoes without socks? He was playing tennis on the tennis court in the White House, his son, and was not wearing socks. Developed a blister, and because of chemical interaction with his tennis shoe and the open wound, developed an infection. I said it.
Yeah, you did funny.
I said it, Mike. All right, we'll see you guys later.